Looks like Phyllis is there too. Let's go up there. Yeah, let's see if we can get it switched to the screen. All right, stick around. We have Phyllis Miller and Luke Berryman joining us. Oh, there they are. All right, fantastic. Oh, fabulous. All right. Thank you so much for the technology. Welcome to Birmingham virtually. I'm going to get myself on screen. We have a crowd here that just watched the set of student-produced documentaries and just saw you virtually on in some of the student work. Maybe Phyllis, let's start with you. Could you introduce yourself and the work that you do?
I'm Phyllis Zimbler Miller. I'm out here in Los Angeles, although I grew up in the Midwest and I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, and that's really the start of this project. Without going into a long song and dance, it led to my many, many, many years later asking to do a project with the school district in Elgin, which led eventually, after we did my play, Thin Edge of the Wedge, a nonfiction Holocaust play, led to this student-produced documentary project, which Luke, who had already come to speak in a snowstorm to the teachers who watched my play being stage read, was interviewed by one of the students because he's doing such amazing work with the ninth candle.
All right, well, that's a great segue to you, Luke. Could you introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little about how you launched Ninth Candle and also how you became involved in this project?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and thanks again, Phyllis, for all of your work and for including me in this project. So yeah, my name's Luke. I am the founder of the Ninth Candle. We are a non-profit organization based in Chicago, but we work with schools all across the United States to help them improve the way that they teach the Holocaust. So we run educational programs for students and professional development programs for teachers. Like I said, we're based in Chicago, but as you can probably tell, I was not born in Chicago. I'm from England originally. I've lived in the US for about 10 years now. As for the Ninth Candle and how it was founded, it's kind of a long story. I will give you a shorter version. So I have an academic background in the Nazi era. I did a PhD on Nazi Germany and how the Nazis had used classical music in their propaganda. After that, I went into education. I worked in schools and universities back home in England and also in the US. And spent a lot of time traveling, going around different schools all around the world. And for a long time thought, wouldn't it be great if I could have this kind of organization that would bring together the research I did for the PhD on the one hand with all of the experience that I'm getting in the classroom on the other. And then around 2018 or 19, I found out that my grandfather, who had passed away in 2006, without ever having breathed a word of about the Holocaust to anyone, I found out just through pure coincidence that he had dozens of relatives who had died in the Holocaust, and he had never told anyone in our family about this. When I found out, this was kind of a process of going through a family tree. I phoned up my mom and said, "Hey, did you know about this?" And she said no. She immediately phoned my grandmother, who has since passed on as well, but was alive at the time, and asked her, "Hey, did you know about this?" And she also did not know. So this was a secret. I like in my grandfather's head, he had decided it was a secret, I guess. I'll never know because I can't speak to him about it. And he carried it with him to the grave. He just never breathed a word about it to anybody. And for whatever reason, that discovery lit a fire under me. And within 6 months of that, I'd started the ninth candle. I guess I figured that if he couldn't speak about this, maybe I should try and speak about it for him. So that's how it came to be. And yeah, 5 years later, we're still going. So that's
That's
us.
wonderful. Well, I know we have a reputation here in Birmingham of having a very active and curious audience. I'm going to open it up for questions for the two of you. All right, who wants to kick us off? Crowd. Questions about what you saw, questions about the process. Thank you. Yes. Somebody has to break the ice and be the first question asker. For sure. I'll relay the questions because the audio might not make it to you.
I might be wrong, so I hope I'm not wrong, but could Phyllis maybe speak a little bit about what, because I know in your introduction you mentioned working with students in film. What was there any sort of process with these students in terms of how they were guided to the topics they covered, or what they, was there any activity they did that led them to select what they wanted to see in your film?
For sure. All right. I'm going to be the audience translator. All right, Phyllis, this one really goes to you. Can you tell us a little about some of the preparation and framework that you did working with the students and how they came to their topics? Can you give us a little insight in what their sort of starting point was before they took on such a weighty subject?
Certainly. Well, first I have to roll back a little and say that the school district that Elgin is in is amazing. I said this zany idea. Why don't we have an internship this summer for students who are interested in this concept of doing student documentaries on anti-Semitism? And not only did the school district say yes, they paid for the salary of Brian Ehrlich, who's my partner as director in this. The students went for free, and if they completed their project, they got credit. So I tell you that to encourage anyone listening. So Brian and I gave them some ideas, but we also suggested they look up their own ideas. We did do a couple of important things. Through a contact, I had an expert on copyright talk to them so they understood what they could and couldn't do. And I also had someone from an entertainment lawyer here talk about certain aspects. So we did give them, and Luke, I just remembered, gave them a talk by Zoom on doing research on historical topics. And then Brian was there in the classroom every day to help them. I will say that Brian and I then did a final edit when sometimes students, now remember they were all non-Jewish students. Elgin's a town with one synagogue. I grew up there, very few Jews. Frequently, I was the only Jewish kid in my class. I tell you that just to understand that they are not people who are so familiar. So sometimes when they were doing really negative images, we said, well, maybe we should shorten that part a little because unfortunately people might believe that part. So there was some editing of the student work.
For sure. That actually gives great insight. We've got teachers and students here in our audience. So I think that was a really helpful insight for people who might be thinking
Can
about
I add one more thing? I just
Yes,
realized
please do.
I confused the two speeches. The entertainment lawyer was copyright. The other person was an accessibility. He's known throughout the world, and that's really important. Every time I watch a documentary in which about the Holocaust, and a really important sentence is only on the screen with no voiceover, it drives me crazy. We have to remember that some people can see, some people can hear, and really, if we're doing such important work, we have to make it as accessible as possible. So in a perfect world, Brian and I would have liked to have had subtitles for every single one of those short documentaries. We didn't have the money, So the people who did do it, the students that Brian and I went through, took very long amount of time and corrected the automatic subtitles.
Oh, I
Okay,
know how labor intensive that is.
I just wanted to add that.
Yes, well, I mean, that's exactly the kind of logistics and level of detail that's so helpful for people who might want to replicate the program. All right, next, yes, question in the back.
So the students prior to starting the internship, sorry, they ever required reading lists, or what curriculum or something that did they have to do a curriculum to kind of give them a basic understanding?
So this is a question about the kind of background and prep, and this might, both Phyllis and Luke, this might be right in your wheelhouse. What kind of reading materials, curriculum, preparatory materials were provided to the students to be able to get them to learn the history in such a short period of time?
They'd heard Luke speak. I'm laughing because we didn't give them any preparation because we had done this 1.5 day or 2 day event at the end of January, a few months before, in which there were two groups of students, the digital media students, and many of them were the ones in this summer program, and the drama students who, on a Thursday morning, we took both sets to the Holocaust Museum in Skokie. On Thursday evening, they came to the synagogue in Elgin. Many of them had never been in a synagogue and did the stage reading of the play. And then Friday, we did a whole day teacher conference for history, social studies, etc., in which they saw the play, but they also heard such people as Luke speak. So these were rather prepared. And I want to do one little plug. So our students got a really good report back from Illinois Holocaust Museum. They said your students were really, better, more attentive, better behaved. Yes, because we had prepared them. So they were very connected. Whereas, I don't know if Luke will disagree with me, but I'm just saying, if you're just taking your students to the Holocaust Museum without any preparation, as one student said, I think you heard, it's just another school assignment. Luke, you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly agree with what you just said, Phyllis, that there's a risk of it becoming just another field trip if the students aren't sufficiently prepared. For the question, that's a really difficult one and a very important one. I think for us at the Ninth Candle, there are two things that we try and do in relation to this question. Number one is to emphasize to students that the Holocaust is contemporary history. And as such, it is still being investigated by professional historians, right? Professional historians do not have all of the answers yet. They're right down to the point, there are still new documents, new sites, new stories being discovered all of the time. And you'll find that out if you speak to folks who work at, just to give an example off the top of my head, I was speaking to somebody who worked in the Sobibor Museum, the site of the former extermination camp in Sobibor earlier
Poland.
this year. And just on his desk, there's a bunch of small green medicine bottles. And I asked him, what are those? And he said, "Oh, we just dug them up. They've just appeared. They are still literally excavating that site and finding new things all of the time." So that's number one thing to remember, right? Is that if students want to understand this topic, they need to put their own researcher's hat on and say, I'm going to get into this and I'm going to investigate it for myself. The next thing that we try and do, rather than say, like, you should go away and read text A, text B, and text C, and then you will understand this, instead, what we try and do is give them like the toolkit that they need to become a researcher, right? We will try and show them how professional historians do what they do. So that means, like, where do you find your sources? How do you tell if a source is reliable or not? How then do you analyze that source? And then how do you draw some kind of conclusion from that source that will shed some kind of meaningful light on the topic that you're trying to study? So it's a difficult question, and but like I said, an important one. And I think the thing to emphasize to students is that the reading list but this subject is just bottomless. It's
Endless. And
bottomless. You can just
I'd
keep
like to
going
say one
forever
more.
and ever.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't
please
mean
do.
to, I step over. But the one thing I think it's really important, because I'm doing research for a book I'm writing called, hope I find a publisher, Things You Didn't Know About the Holocaust. And it's not monolithic. So whenever you think you know something, if you say to yourself, well, I know at Auschwitz, everyone got tattoos. No, that's not true. It depends on the group. It depends on the date. It depends on so many things. So I'm particularly concerned about Holocaust assertion denial, trying to educate people. You have to know so many variables. And Auschwitz was only, I hate to say this, but just one part of a huge non-monolithic event with so many countries. I'll just share this one story. When I was on my honeymoon in 1969, yes, I'm quite old, in Israel, and my husband and I were at this museum that was before Yad Vashem, before the official Israel Holocaust Museum, and we were seeing all these tombstones of different communities. And I'll never forget. Now imagine, at the time, I didn't have any Holocaust relatives. We're standing in front of this tombstone, and it says, how many Jews in Greece were murdered? And I went, there were Jews in Greece? That's how little I knew. And unfortunately, that's how little many people know today.
I think that's such an important point to make. And I really appreciate, Luke, also in the film in which you appear, that idea of sort of inviting inquiry as a method. I think that's just such a useful tool, and the emphasis on finding primary source documents. I think that's just a wonderful exercise for students. All right, there's another question from the back, and then I'll.
I'm curious about, I saw your video, saw the scroll being carried. Is any criteria for these documentaries for the Torah, Adonai, or anybody started to be talked about before decisions are made?
So is this about the depiction of the Torah, like the Torah scroll on the film visually?
Is that basic? What I'm asking, is that part of the requirement for them to go that far back to understand who the Jews were, why God picked them, et cetera, or do we, I guess, pretty much on our own do what we think is right? Okay, you see what I'm saying? In other words, there's got to be some kind of standard. What is our standard here in all these groups? So I'm saying there's got to be a standard somewhere.
So I think let me ask you if I'm getting your question right. The student's selection of some imagery that goes back to the sort of the Torah scrolls and in the Hebrew, you're wondering whether that iconography connects to the modern history.
Well, what I'm saying is there's got to be a standard for all of us. Bottom line, whatever you believe. So I see a lot of groups in the videos. What is the standard for them to be able to believe and understand who they are and what they are?
Oh, all right. So I guess I think this sounds like a question about, perhaps like the diversity of Jewish identity within the films. Did the students create any kind of, or was there guidance or discussion about what does it mean to be defined as a member of the Jewish community when you were discussing perhaps being targeted by anti-Semitic actors?
I think that's a very interesting question. And I don't know, because Brian Ehrlich may have had such discussions with them. But I think the questioner asked a really interesting question about standardizing. And I think there isn't an answer, because I was just reading about Iraqi Jews who were murdered in a pogrom in Iraq in 1943. And Sephardic Jews, and one of the things that many people today don't know is that over 50% of Israelis are not light skinned as I am, but are dark skinned. So we go back over 2,000 years to the temple and beyond. Our calendar is, I always forget, 5,000 something is our Jewish calendar. And so it really depends, again, on what century, what country, what language you're talking about. Jews have many different languages. But the Torah once the temple was destroyed and the rabbis created a Judaism that could survive outside Israel, and the diaspora became a central tenet of Judaism. Yes. Does that answer it? I hope.
Yeah,
Luke,
so
what do you want to add?
the people of the book, the
Yes.
sort of Torah is the sort of unifying idea across all of these different cultural expressions of Jewish life in the diaspora over millennia. So
it means if you
a
go
lot of
into
diversity.
I just want to say, if you go into a synagogue anywhere in the world on a certain Shabbat, they will all be reading the same part of the Torah because that's the portion of the week. In whichever language, I mean, they're reading it in Hebrew, but okay, that's
Yeah.
an
But the
answer.
other prayers in the vernacular, whether you're
Yes,
in Italy,
exactly.
it'll be in Italy, and yes,
Exactly.
in Italian.
I-
Yes, Luke.
I would add maybe just as a footnote to that. I'm not sure this even qualifies as an answer to the question, but just as a thought in response to it, I suppose that I think, first of all, think it's a really important question to ask. Um, and I think that for me, it taps into a flaw which is in my field, Holocaust education, the Holocaust education space. And that flaw is that we, as Holocaust educators, inadvertently, because of the nature of the subject that we're teaching and the way in which we're teaching it, you can inadvertently end up adopting the Nazis' definition of what a Jew was, right, or what a Jewish person is. And so I think it is extremely important for groups like mine to be able to explain and to teach just how flawed uh, and how wrong the Nazis' understanding of Judaism, Jewishness, Jewish people was. And that requires us to teach something about Jewish history along the way. Um, I would say as well that for us, the Ninth Candle, obviously I can't speak for all of the other Holocaust Ed organizations out there, but for us, we're not a religious organization. That's partly because we believe that the Holocaust is relevant to everyone, whether they're a person of faith or not, and whether they're Jewish or not. Like, it was a Jewish tragedy, but there are lessons for all of humanity within it. So we're not a religious organization, but what we do want to do, especially when we are, like Phyllis said, in a community like Elgin, Illinois, where there's not necessarily a big Jewish community, we want to show our participants that Judaism is something that they can enjoy. It's something they can participate in. It's something they can learn from, whether they're Jewish or not, right? We don't want them to feel alienated from it in any way. So, yeah, not a religious organization, but we do try and um, build some cross-community bridges in the process of teaching what we teach.
That's great. Thank you for both of your very thoughtful answers. I saw a hand up over here. Yes, Kathy.
I was wondering if October 7th will always be a part of Holocaust program from now till future.
So this is a question about the impact of October 7th. Do you see in your work that the tragedy of October 7th is woven in and will be woven in to the work you do in teaching about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism?
Luke, you might want to answer it because I would answer it in a different way. I would say that I also do a podcast, and Never Again Is Now, in which we talk about anti-Semitism today. One of the things that we work really hard at is trying to explain to people the difference between being against Jews and being against Zionists, which doesn't mean it's right to be against Zionists, but to try and explain the difference between Jews that Luke was just talking about and Zionism, but why many, many, many Jews are what you would call Zionists because we support our ancestral homeland. So in my own work, although I've done a lot of podcasts about Israel at war, I'm not sure that it will continue to be as important, but I don't know about Luke because of what the kids are asking him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It is the question, and it has been the question since it happened. For me personally, for the Ninth Candle as an organization, when I founded the Ninth Candle in 2020, one of the things that I aspired to do was to disentangle Holocaust education from discussions about Israel, precisely because of what I mentioned in relation to the last question, which is that the Holocaust is a Jewish tragedy, but there is something essential for all of humanity within it, right? It's if you want to know what it means to be human, then you need to be able to know something about the Holocaust. You need to be able to understand something about what this event was and why and how it happened in the time and place that it did. So when we set out to teach that historical period and not to talk about modern day, present day Israel. I think um, that position has opened up doors for us that may have been closed otherwise. I'm very proud, for example, of the fact that we've done a number of Holocaust education programs in majority Muslim schools, where this is often a topic that's taboo. So to be able to kind of break down that barrier, I think is really important. Things have changed since October 7th. I think that before that event, the questions about Israel generally didn't come up so much in our programs, but now students do want to understand why it happened, and it's an extremely difficult question to answer. There are obviously threads that connect the ideology of Hamas to anti-Semitism as it existed in 20th century Europe. But to disentangle those, you need to be prepared to go on a really deep dive into the history of both 20th century Europe and the history of the Middle East, which, as we all know, stretches back hundreds and hundreds of years. So again, like, this goes back to the very first question that I was asked. What we try and convince kids to do is put their researcher's hat on and to leave them with the understanding that this is something that they need to go away and study for themselves, so that they can increase their own understanding and come to an opinion that's truly informed, as opposed to just a reflection of whatever it is they've seen on social media or heard in the news. That feels like a very long-winded answer, but I hope that it answered your question.
I think that that's a great answer about urging people to get into the history's nuance and to realize that it isn't just bumper sticker activism, but being able to get students to be able to dive into the things that make resolving conflict so hard. We're reaching the end, but I want to leave a little room for teachers or students. Is that a student hand? Oh, bingo. There we go. Oh, this is a great one. All right. How do we get schools to be able to do more programs like this, to be able to introduce more Holocaust education and to have programs that use media and filmmaking as part of the methodology?
I asked the school district of Elgin, and I said I would provide the information, etc. And they said yes and paid for it. So I'm just saying, you have to ask. And they paired me with a fabulous person in charge of social studies curriculum for the whole district. And we said, yep, let's run with it. So really, ask, do you agree? And Luke, who hasn't said this, but I'm going to say it for him, his programs are free, everyone. He doesn't charge at all. So you can have him in person, and I don't get paid for saying this, in person or on Zoom. So I highly recommend it. But can I just say one thing that's really important? I've been doing this recently, a deep dive between World War I and World War II. I'm not talking politics, but I really wish that Holocaust education would include much more, so I'm talking to you teachers now, about the lead up to World War II, because I have started to discover some amazing things that parallel in some respects the destruction of democracy today. Again, I'm not talking politics. I'm just talking about why studying the Holocaust can be very important for, as Luke says, for understanding humanity's need for independence rather than dictatorial control. How's that?
Excellent. A very timely ending answer for us this evening. Luke, just give us a little bit of insight into how you get invited into classrooms or into schools and what some of your takeaways.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And honestly, the answer is that it varies from one school to another. Sometimes the school has found us, whether like through a newspaper or through our website or social media accounts. Other times we find the school. Sometimes we'll go to a school and then that school will tell another school that, oh, we did this program and it was cool. So yeah, it's different either way. But like Phyllis said, thanks to our uh, donors and supporters, we never charge schools for what we do. So for all of the teachers listening, all you need to do is reach out to us, and it's that simple. We'll set up a program with you. Every program that we do is customized to each school that we visit. We really want every school to feel like the program is theirs, that they own it, that they have some say over what it looks like. We really want teachers and students alike to think about why we're doing Holocaust education at all. Like, how is this going to fit into our wider curriculum? Where do we want to be at the end of the journey, so that it's not like Phyllis said about going to the Holocaust Museum, so that it doesn't end up being just another field trip, right? We want it to be something that has a more lasting impact than that. And for the student who asked the question, I would say, first of all, good for you, because you have exactly the right questions in the forefront of your mind. And that's something that no one can teach you, right? So you already have the important stuff going on inside your head. That's the most, that's the most crucial thing. And then the second thing after that would just be to underline what Phyllis said, which is that um, you need to do something, right? Go ask, go speak to people, go tell your school, I think this is important, and here are the reasons why. Don't stop at your school. Go and speak to local politicians. Go speak to your people in the House of Representatives. Go, speak to local journalists. Tell them why you think this is important, and that's how things get done.
And if you want a really easy place to start, you can go to thinedgeofthewedge.com. That's my free nonfiction Holocaust play. And there's all kinds of resources that just to get students thinking about the variety of topics. So it's thinedgeofthewedge.com. It's a British expression. It means you let Luke explain it, that the wedge is pretty, and then it gets wider and wider and wider until it's too late to stop.
Thin edge of the wedge. I like it. Yes, and then of course, Alabama Holocaust Education Center, happy to make these visits as well. Well, I just want to thank you both so much for Zooming in with us here in Birmingham, Alabama. We really appreciate the work you're doing, and hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, 2 more minutes and then I will let y'all get out of here. I just